The quiet child in a monastery. The architect of genocide. The connection is chilling. Imagine a boy, Saloth Sar. Born in 1925, not in a palace of power, but in a small fishing village, his life began as unremarkable. His family was comfortable, even connected to the royal court, but he was just one of many children. At 6 years old, he was sent away. First to a Catholic mission, then, at 9, to a Buddhist monastery in Phnom Penh. You're picturing a serene, spiritual upbringing, aren't you? A life of contemplation, of chanting, of discipline. But what was really taking root in that young mind? For 6 years, he lived as a novice monk. He learned to read and write. He followed the ancient rhythms of monastic life. Friends and family would later describe him as a gentle, smiling boy. Nothing special. Not a brilliant student, not a troublemaker. Just average. It's a terrifyingly normal picture. A blank slate. But even a blank slate can be etched with something monstrous. He left the monastery. He attended a technical school, trained as a carpenter. He played the violin. He fell in love. This is the man who would one day orchestrate the murder of nearly 2 million of his own people. So you have to ask yourself, what happened? What turns a smiling boy, a novice monk, a quiet carpenter, into the architect of the killing fields? The answer wasn't in Cambodia. Not yet. The seeds of that transformation were about to be planted thousands of miles away in the heart of Paris. From intellectual promise to the architect of genocide. How did Paris change everything? Imagine it. 1949. A young, promising Cambodian man named Saloth Sar arrives in Paris on a government scholarship. He's supposed to be studying radio electronics, the cutting-edge technology of his time. But the lecture halls don't hold his attention. His grades slip. Something else has captured his imagination, something far more powerful and dangerous than radio waves. In the cafes and student apartments of post-war Paris, he finds it. He finds Karl Marx. He finds Vladimir Lenin. He finds a small, intense circle of fellow Cambodian expatriates who, like him, are hungry for answers. They devour radical texts, debating late into the night, fueled by cheap wine and revolutionary fervor. But Saloth Sar isn't just reading complex political theory. He's simplifying it, distilling it down to a terrifyingly pure, brutal ideology. He starts to believe that to save Cambodia, you must first destroy it. Erase the cities. Abolish money, family, religion. Force everyone back to the land, back to a primitive, agrarian fantasy he would later call Year Zero. The student from a good family was disappearing. In his place, a true believer was being forged. His scholarship was eventually revoked for academic neglect. But by then, it didn't matter. He was returning home not as a failure, but as a man with a blueprint for a nightmare. This isn't just history. This is the chilling playbook for how chaos breeds tyranny.
A testament to the stark
Imagine
realities of a
returning
forgotten
home.
era.
But home is no longer a place of comfort, it's a tinderbox. For Saloth Sar, the man you will come to know as
These
Pol
streets
Pot.
hummed with a life
This
that
was
belied
Cambodia
poverty.
in the late
The faces captured here
1960s.
tell a story of resilience.
He
in a city
arrived not
hurtling
as a
towards an
general,
uncertain
but as a
future.
ghost
Footage
from the
from
jungle,
autumn of
armed with an
1962 reveals the
ideology
stark
forged in
reality of the
Parisian
conflict.
cafes
Villages
and
like
hardened
this one
by
were often caught in the
revolutionary
crossfire,
violence.
their populations.
The landscape he found was primed for explosion. The government in Phnom Penh was a corrupt puppet, propped up by American dollars while the countryside starved.
Our spirit remains
And then
unbroken.
came the bombs.
We must believe in a better
Thousands
tomorrow.
of tons of American ordnance, meant for the Viet Cong in neighboring Vietnam, rained down on eastern Cambodia, obliterating villages and vaporizing innocents. Each crater became a recruitment poster. Each civilian death fueled the righteous, burning hatred that Pol Pot masterfully channeled.
Etched into the ruins and the
He didn't
silence of the
promise
approaching
wealth
night.
or freedom.
They called this progress.
He promised something far more
But
seductive
all
to the
that remained
broken
was
and the
wind
vengeful,
howling through the
a
skeletons
cleansing
of
fire.
forgotten ambitions.
A new beginning from year zero, his Khmer Rouge whispered of a pure, agrarian society, free from foreign corruption and city
By the
decay.
late 60s, the city was
They were
swelling
the
with
answer to the
refugees.
chaos.
These streets, once
The
vibrant,
people,
were now marked
desperate
by a
for
desperate
any
fight for
savior,
existence.
started to believe. They couldn't yet know that to achieve this utopian dream, everyone they knew and everything they loved
He survived,
would first
yes,
have
but
to
the
be
scars ran
destroyed.
deeper than the eye could see. Every line etched on his face told a story
This
of
isn't
enduring
just
struggle.
history. This is the blueprint for total societal collapse. And it all started April 17th, 1975. Imagine the streets of Phnom Penh. After years of brutal civil war, black-clad soldiers march into the capital. At first, a celebration. People wave flags, believing the nightmare is finally over. They thought they were being liberated. But the smiles on the
momentous
soldiers'
day of
faces
April
were not
17th,
of joy.
1975.
They were
Black-clad
empty.
soldiers entered the capital.
Within
met by cheering
hours,
crowds
the
hoping
city's
for
joy
peace.
curdled into confusion, then into stark terror. Loudspeakers crackled to life with a chilling new decree.
The streets
The
of
city
Phnom
was
Penh
to be
erupted as the
emptied.
black-clad soldiers marched in.
Immediately,
The crowds welcomed them as
this was the
liberators,
dawn of
unaware
Year
the darkness
Zero.
that followed.
Pol Pot and his Khmer Rouge declared that history itself was being reset. Everything you knew, your family, your job,
On April
your
17th,
education, your
1975,
possessions,
the
was
streets
now
of Phnom
worthless.
Penh erupted in celebration
In
as the
fact,
black-clad
it was a
soldiers
death
arrived.
sentence.
The fall of Phnom
The
Penh.
city, the very
A day that
concept of
began with
urban life,
celebrations
was
soon
deemed a
descended into
cancer
one of
to
the
be
darkest
excised.
chapters in Cambodian history.
Over 2 million people were driven from their homes at gunpoint. Doctors, teachers, artists, anyone with glasses, anyone who spoke a foreign language. They were forced into the countryside, into a vast, nationwide labor camp. They were told it would only be for 3 days. But for most, there would be no return. What kind of society intentionally devours its own mind, its own soul? What was waiting for them in the fields? 1 in 4. That's how many died. Not from war, but from their own government. His name was Saloth Sar, but the world would come to know him as Pol Pot. He wasn't born a monster, but a student who traveled to Paris, absorbing radical ideas. He dreamed of a new Cambodia, an agrarian utopia he called Year Zero.
In the
But to
silence
build
of the
his new
dusk,
world,
the land
the old
itself
one had to be
whispers of the years
completely
of terror.
and brutally
The ruins
annihilated.
stand testament to a brutal
Imagine
history.
the scene.
tranquility of the temples belied
April
the terror spreading
17th,
across the land. From these
1975.
dusty roads emerged a
The
force that would
Khmer
silence
Rouge
a
marches
generation.
into Phnom Penh. Residents cheer, believing the brutal civil war is finally over. They are tragically
April 17th,
mistaken.
1975.
Within
The Khmer
hours,
Rouge
the
marched
city's
into
2
Phnom
million
Penh.
people are
The takeover
forced
was
out at
swift,
gunpoint.
the future uncertain.
Doctors, teachers, artists, even people who simply wore glasses were marked for death. The cities had to
A
be
chilling
emptied.
silence hangs over the streets
The
of Phnom
educated
Penh
class
during this
had to be
period.
eliminated.
A stark reminder of the city's
You were
isolation
driven into
and
the
profound
countryside,
loss.
into what would become known as the Killing Fields. Forced labor from sunrise to sundown, fueled by a single, watery bowl of rice porridge. Your life is worthless. A wrong look, a remembered song from your past, is enough to get you killed.
Silence was heavier than the rubble.
And for those considered true
We were
enemies,
barely holding
a special
on.
fate awaited.
50 years.
A former high school
50
was
years of this
repurposed.
struggle, and still
It became Security
the tools
Prison
break in my
21.
hands.
Over 17,000 souls were dragged inside its walls for interrogation and torture. Almost none came out alive. How does a school become a factory of death? When the world
echoes of the
gasped at
past
Cambodia's
remain
truth,
etched into the
Pol Pot
landscape
just
and
smiled.
the hands that work it.
Because for him, the game wasn't over. It had only changed arenas. January 7th, 1979. Vietnamese tanks roll into a phantom city. Phnom Penh is empty, silent, a ghost
The
town
advance was
haunted by the
relentless.
specter of
And
nearly
in the
2
ruins
million
of the
dead.
old world, the cost
The
was
first
measured not in
journalists to
buildings,
enter found
but in
not a
lives.
capital, but a crime scene on a national scale. What they documented was unimaginable. Piles of skulls. Mass graves stretching as far as the eye could see. The world finally saw the face of Year Zero, and it was a
War
death
machine
mask.
moves on,
But
leaving
where was
behind
the
only
architect
dust
of this
and the memory of
apocalypse?
those who fell.
Pol Pot wasn't captured. He wasn't on trial. He had simply vanished, melting into the dense jungles along the Thai
The
border
advance
with the
was
remnants of
relentless.
his fanatical
Through
army.
the dust and debris of
You
the
might
ruined
imagine
city,
his story
the armor
ends there,
pushed
a
forward.
reviled monster hunted in the
We found
wilderness.
him among the ruins,
But you would be wrong,
just one of the countless
because
forgotten
in the twisted
casualties
logic
of
of
a
the
forgotten
Cold War, a new chapter was about to be written. The butcher of Cambodia was about to become a pawn for global superpowers, his survival guaranteed not by his own strength, but by the cynical calculations of others. How does a man responsible for millions of deaths become an asset? His final interviews, not regret, but a chilling justification. You won't believe what he said. While Cambodia unearthed its killing fields, while a nation grappled with the ghosts of nearly 2 million dead, the architect of it all simply vanished. For almost 2 decades, Pol Pot lived in the dense jungles along the Thai border, a phantom protected by loyalists and cold geopolitical indifference. Imagine that.
Was the loudest testament to
The man
devastation.
responsible for
Footage
Year
from the
Zero,
era reveals
living
the
out his
full
days,
extent of the
never
destruction.
once facing a
A
courtroom.
generation later, the
But his
silence
story
here
wasn't
is
over.
deafening. Decades
Then,
pass,
in
but the true cost of the
1997,
conflict is
the world
etched
saw
not
him
just in
again.
the ruins, but in the
Not in
silent tremors of
handcuffs
those who
before a
survived.
tribunal,
In the
but under
aftermath,
house
the
arrest by his
regime's
own
presence
fracturing
lingered like a
Khmer
phantom
Rouge
limb.
faction.
The faces of the
A
survivors
journalist
etched
was
with the
granted
memory of their
access.
arrival. From
This was the
battlefield
moment
to
for
the
an
cell,
answer, for some kind
the
of reckoning.
confinement began long before
And what
they
did this
reached
frail
the
old
walls.
man say? He claimed his conscience was clear. He spoke of mistakes, but never of mass murder. He insisted he did what he had to do to fight Vietnamese expansion, blaming traitors in his own ranks for the excesses.
Was it
There was
wisdom
no
gained
monster
through decades
confessing.
of struggle, or the
Only an
profound delusion
ideologue,
of a forgotten
utterly
era
convinced of
clinging
his
to
own
its
righteousness. He died just months later, in April 1998, officially of a heart attack. His death came just as
Silence
his
was
former
their language
comrades
now.
were
A
negotiating to
generation
hand him over
forged
to
in
an
the fires of
international
conflict,
trial.
staring into an uncertain
Convenient,
dawn.
wasn't it? 1 in 4. That's how many vanished.
So many battles fought.
The chilling
so
math
many
of
words
absolute
left
power
unsaid.
in Cambodia.
As the light faded,
When the
weight of his
Vietnamese
silence
army
grew
finally
heavier.
rolled into Phnom Penh in 1979, they didn't find the liberated city. They found a ghost town. A haunted, silent testament to 4 years of horror. The survivors who emerged from the killing fields were skeletons, their minds shattered. The country was broken. No doctors, no teachers, no engineers. The Khmer Rouge had executed anyone with an education, anyone with glasses, anyone who could think for themselves. Imagine trying to rebuild a nation from zero. Not just a nation of buildings, but a nation of people. And justice? For decades, it was a ghost, too. The architects of this apocalypse, men like Pol Pot, lived freely, some even dying peacefully of old age. The world, it seemed, had moved on. But for Cambodia, the past was never past. The extraordinary chambers in the courts of Cambodia were finally established, a desperate, belated attempt to hold a few old men accountable for the deaths of millions. But can a courtroom truly heal a wound that deep? Can it bring back the 2 million souls lost to an ideology that saw human beings as nothing more than obstacles? The Cambodian genocide is not just a dark chapter in history. It is a mirror. A stark, chilling warning of what happens when one group decides who deserves to live and who must be erased.